The classroom was filled with the usual hum of chatter and rustling papers. Students were adjusting their chairs, talking quietly to each other, and getting ready for the day's lessons. In the back corner of the room, a young woman sat quietly, her notebook open but largely untouched. She wasn't shy in the usual sense, but she preferred watching and listening to others rather than speaking herself. Teachers often overlooked her because she didn't draw attention. She didn't raise her hand, she didn't shout answers, and she rarely laughed loudly at jokes. She seemed small in the grand scheme of the classroom, almost invisible. Yet there was something different about her, though few noticed. That morning, the music teacher walked in carrying a large stack of sheet music. The students perked up immediately, some with excitement and others with dread. Music class was usually fun, but today promised something unusual. The teacher cleared his throat and said that everyone would have a turn, playing a difficult piece on the piano. The room went quiet, and a few students groaned. This piece was known to be challenging, even for advanced students. Whispers floated through the classroom, some students joking about who would struggle and who might actually succeed. No one expected the young woman in the back to be anything other than ordinary. The teacher scanned the room, his eyes lingering on her for a moment. He had noticed her quiet demeanor before, but never much else. He decided to call on her. There was a faint smile on his lips, almost amused. "You," he said, pointing toward the back. "Come up and try this piece." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. Some students exchanged smirks, assuming she would fumble and provide a moment of entertainment. She stood up slowly, feeling a flutter in her chest. She had played piano before, but never in front of anyone like this. Most of the students thought she didn't play at all. She carried herself calmly toward the piano, careful not to draw too much attention to herself. Her hands shook slightly as she brushed her fingers over the keys for the first time that morning. The sheet music in front of her seemed intimidating. It was filled with complex notes, fast passages, and sudden changes in rhythm. The teacher handed it to her, giving a small nod. "Give it a try," he said casually, his tone almost playful. "Let's see what you can do." She sat down on the bench, her fingers hovering over the keys. Her heart was pounding, but she took a deep breath and began. The first notes came out softly, almost uncertainly, but even that sounded better than anyone in the room expected. A few students leaned forward, curious. The teacher, who had thought this would be a simple exercise, raised an eyebrow. There was something in the sound that caught him off guard. The notes were clear, precise, and controlled, yet carried a certain depth that seemed far beyond someone who had never performed publicly. The young woman's hands began to move more confidently as she found the rhythm of the piece. She didn't rush. She let each note speak. The classroom was no longer filled with the typical noises of shuffling papers and quiet whispers. Everyone was listening. Some students sat up straighter, their eyes widening. Others covered their mouths with their hands, unable to believe what they were hearing. Even the teacher leaned forward, trying to understand how someone so quiet could produce such beautiful music. There was a natural flow to her playing, as if she and the piano were one. She interpreted the notes with emotion, feeling every rise and fall, every delicate passage. The music seemed to fill the room, stretching out in a way that made it impossible for anyone to look away or focus on anything else. For a moment, the classroom was transformed. It wasn't just a group of students and a teacher. It was a small concert hall, and she was the performer everyone had come to see. Her fingers danced over the keys with grace and precision. Fast passages that seemed impossible to master were executed flawlessly. Notes that were meant to be soft were gentle yet clear, and louder sections carried power and emotion without ever sounding forced. It was more than technical skill. It was artistry. The young woman seemed unaware of the growing attention. She was lost in the music, completely focused on each note, each chord, each pause. The rest of the classroom existed only as a background to her playing. Some students tried to glance at each other, silently communicating their surprise. How could someone so quiet, someone who never seemed interested in drawing attention, play like this? Others whispered, almost to themselves, about how incredible it was. Even the teacher, who had expected a simple and perhaps humorous performance, found himself holding his breath, caught between astonishment and disbelief. He had no idea what to say, and for the first time in his career, he found himself wondering if he had underestimated someone completely. Time seemed to stretch as she continued. Each note built upon the last, creating a story without words. The music told of something deep and personal, yet everyone in the room could feel it. There was tension, there was beauty, there was life in every chord. The students were captivated, some leaning forward with their hands on their desks, some with eyes closed, simply letting the music wash over them. The young woman had a way of connecting with the listener, of making them feel the story she was telling through sound. When she finished the first section, she paused, her hands hovering above the keys for a moment. There was silence, thick and heavy, as if the room itself was catching its breath. No one moved. No one spoke. The teacher's eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open, struggling to find words. The students looked at each other, amazed. None of them had expected this. She had completely shattered their assumptions in the span of a few minutes. She took a quiet breath, and her hands moved again, preparing for the next section. Confidence replaced the initial nervousness, and her playing became even more expressive. The intricate patterns of the piece flowed naturally, each chord perfectly placed, each transition smooth and deliberate. The audience could feel the emotion behind every note, the hours of practice, and the dedication that had brought her to this moment. She wasn't just playing the notes, she was telling a story, and everyone in the room was part of it. Some students were on the edge of their seats, unable to believe their ears. Others whispered to each other, trying to process what they were hearing. The teacher leaned back, taking a moment to let it sink in. He realized that his initial assumptions had been entirely wrong. He had thought this would be a simple exercise, perhaps even a moment of embarrassment for a quiet student. Instead, it had become a revelation. As she continued, there was a rhythm that seemed effortless, almost natural, yet every note was deliberate. The complexity of the piece required skill and experience, yet she handled it with ease. It was clear that she had spent countless hours practicing in secret, honing her craft away from the eyes of those who doubted her. The quiet hours alone at the piano had prepared her for this moment, even if no one else had noticed. By the time she reached the end of the first part, the room was completely silent. Students were staring at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The teacher, who had called her to the piano almost on a whim, was speechless. For a moment, it seemed as if time itself had stopped. She lowered her hands slowly, giving the final note its full weight. The silence hung, heavy with the impact of what had just happened. And then, softly at first, the room erupted. Some students clapped, hesitant but amazed. Others shouted in surprise, unable to contain their excitement. The teacher, recovering from his astonishment, stood and nodded slowly, acknowledging the talent that had been hidden in plain sight. It was a moment none of them would forget. A quiet student, often overlooked, had revealed a genius that no one had anticipated. The beginning of something extraordinary had just taken place, and it all started with the first notes she had dared to play. The applause from the first part of her performance still lingered in the room. As she prepared for the next section of the piece, the young woman took a slow breath, closing her eyes for a brief moment, as if centering herself. Her hands hovered over the keys, but there was no nervousness now, only focus. The silence in the room was different this time. It wasn't the tense quiet that comes before an unexpected moment. It was the quiet of anticipation, of people holding their breath, waiting to be amazed again. The students watched with wide eyes. Some were leaning on their desks, some sitting straight, unable to take their gaze off her. Whispers had started again, low and hesitant. "How is she playing like that?" one student asked quietly. "She makes it look so easy," said another. The teacher, who had been standing to the side, could not believe what he was seeing. He had seen many students play over the years, but nothing like this. Her hands moved with a combination of precision and fluidity that was almost mesmerizing. Every note seemed to find its exact place, every rhythm perfectly timed out. As she began the next part, her fingers moved faster, yet there was no error, no hesitation. The difficult passages that had made so many students anxious before now sounded natural in her hands. The music was no longer just notes on a page. It was alive. It told a story, full of emotion, depth, and subtle nuance. It was as if the piano itself was speaking, and she was its interpreter. The students could feel the tension in the music, the rise and fall, the longing and joy, even if they didn't understand all the technical details. Some of the students who had been quietly skeptical were now leaning closer, almost afraid to blink in case they missed something. They had never seen anyone play like this in real life. Others were whispering to each other, trying to describe the experience. "It's like she knows the music by heart," one said. "I've never heard anything like it," another replied. There was an energy in the room that went beyond the simple act of listening. It was awe, pure and unfiltered. The teacher was no exception. He had expected a student who might stumble or play poorly, perhaps with a few notes here and there that sounded correct. Instead, he was seeing someone who seemed born to play this instrument. The complex chords, the tricky transitions, the emotional crescendos all were handled with ease. He could see her dedication, the countless hours she must have spent practicing alone. And yet, it wasn't just practice that made her performance extraordinary. It was the way she interpreted the music, how she made it her own while staying true to the original composition. As she continued, there was a moment when the music shifted to a softer, more introspective section. Her touch on the keys became delicate, almost whispering. The students leaned forward, captivated by the subtlety and grace of her playing. Even those who did not normally pay attention in music class were now completely absorbed. The young woman's ability to convey emotion through the piano was something rare. She was telling a story without words, and everyone could understand it. Time seemed to blur as she played. The room no longer felt like a classroom. It felt like a small concert hall. The walls, the desks, the students, and the teacher all faded into the background. All that existed was the music and the way it moved through the room, touching each listener in a personal way. Some students felt chills run down their spines. Others felt tears forming, moved by the beauty of what they were hearing. Even the teacher felt a lump in his throat, unable to contain his amazement. The piece grew more complex as she progressed. Rapid sequences of notes required incredible coordination, yet she handled them effortlessly. Each hand seemed to move independently, yet perfectly in harmony. The students whispered to each other about how impossible it looked, how no one else in the room could even imagine playing this well. And yet, here she was, making it seem natural, almost effortless. Her posture was calm, her focus unwavering. She was completely immersed in the music. Occasionally, her eyes would glance at the sheet music, but mostly she played from memory, letting her fingers and instincts guide her. It was clear that this was not just a skill she had learned, it was a part of her. The piano was an extension of herself, and the music was a reflection of her inner world. The students began to notice small details in her playing, the way she emphasized certain notes, the way she used dynamics to create tension and release, the way she lingered on particular chords to draw out emotion. Each choice was deliberate, and it made the music come alive in ways they had never experienced before. Even those who did not know the technical aspects of music could sense the mastery and the genius in her performance. As she reached the climax of this section, the room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the music. The notes were powerful, yet controlled, each one ringing out clearly. Her hands moved faster now, but never carelessly. The students were on the edge of their seats, some holding their breath, completely engrossed. The teacher could only watch, unable to interfere or guide, knowing that this moment was entirely hers. The energy in the room was electric, a shared experience that none of them would ever forget. Finally, she reached the end of the second section. She paused, letting the final note linger, filling the room with its resonance. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, applause began. It started with a few students, hesitant but sincere, and quickly spread throughout the room. Hands clapped, some standing, some cheering quietly, overwhelmed by what they had just witnessed. The teacher, still in shock, finally found his voice and joined in, giving a nod of respect and admiration. He knew that he had underestimated her completely, and he silently acknowledged that he had been wrong. The young woman sat back for a moment, letting her hands rest on her lap. Her breathing was steady, her expression calm. She didn't look for praise or attention. She was satisfied with having expressed herself through the music. The students continued to talk among themselves, buzzing with excitement and wonder. Some couldn't believe what they had just seen and heard. Others were already sharing stories, telling friends about the incredible performance. The teacher approached her cautiously, still amazed. "I had no idea," he said softly, almost in awe. "That was extraordinary. You have an incredible gift." She nodded quietly, offering a small, polite smile. She didn't boast or make a show of it. Her talent spoke for itself. The room was filled with a sense of respect and newfound understanding. The quiet girl who had always been overlooked had just revealed something remarkable. As the day continued, the story of her performance spread through the school. Students who had once ignored her now approached her with curiosity and admiration. They asked questions, not about her personally, but about the music, about how she played, about how she made it look so easy. Even the teacher found himself thinking about her performance, wondering how such talent had gone unnoticed for so long. The young woman returned to her seat, quiet once again, but the atmosphere in the classroom had changed. No one would look at her the same way again. She had shown them a side of herself that they could never ignore, and while she remained humble and reserved, there was a quiet pride in what she had accomplished. She had faced a challenge, one that no one expected her to succeed in, and she had exceeded everyone's expectations. The performance was not just about music. It was about proving her strength, her dedication, and her extraordinary ability. Even after the bell rang and the students left for their next class, the memory of her playing lingered in the room. Some students returned during breaks, sitting quietly and replaying the performance in their minds. Others tried to hum the melodies, attempting to capture even a fraction of what they had heard. The teacher stayed behind for a moment, looking at the piano, reflecting on how easily he had underestimated a quiet student. He realized that talent often hides in unexpected places, waiting for the right moment to shine. That day marked a turning point. The young woman's world had shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. The challenge that the teachers had imposed had led her to reveal a talent that no one had noticed before, and in doing so, she had changed the way everyone saw her. From that moment forward, no one could doubt her abilities. She had faced an unfair expectation and turned it into an extraordinary display of skill, courage, and artistry. The music had spoken, and the world around her had listened. The room had finally settled after the applause, but the young woman did not let the moment distract her. She leaned toward the piano again, her hands brushing lightly over the keys as if feeling the surface for the first time. She had come to a point in the music that was even more demanding than anything she had played so far. This section required not just speed and accuracy, but a deep understanding of the music's emotion. Many students had attempted it before and failed, but she approached it with calm determination. Her fingers moved with precision and confidence. Each note was distinct, each chord full of life. The students, who had been amazed by the earlier sections, now watched in a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some leaned forward, their elbows on their desks, unable to look away. Others whispered to themselves, trying to process the skill and emotion they were witnessing. The teacher, who had seen countless performances, was frozen in his spot. He could only watch, unable to interrupt or guide her. He realized this was beyond instruction. This was genius in motion. As the music swelled, it carried an intensity that filled the room. The notes built upon each other, creating a rising tension that demanded attention. The young woman was completely immersed, her body moving slightly with the rhythm, her eyes focused yet distant, as if she were in another world entirely. The students felt the power of the music and understood that this was more than practice. It was an expression of something deeply personal. The challenging passages came next, a rapid sequence of notes that would have caused most players to falter. Her hands moved in perfect coordination, each finger hitting the right key at exactly the right moment. The room seemed to hold its breath. Some students were gripping their desks, as if fearing that a single wrong note would break the spell. The teacher, unable to hide his astonishment, whispered under his breath, "How is this possible?" As she progressed, the music began to shift. A softer, more delicate melody emerged, requiring both sensitivity and control. Her touch became gentle but deliberate, every note resonating clearly. The students felt a sense of calm wash over them, yet beneath it was a thread of tension, a hint of the complexity still to come. It was a balance that few could achieve, but she managed it effortlessly. Her playing was not only technically perfect, it carried emotion that reached each listener, making them feel as if they were part of the story unfolding before them. The teacher noticed the subtle details in her performance. The way she held certain notes, the tiny pauses between phrases, the careful modulation of volume, everything was intentional. Each decision enhanced the music and drew the listeners in. The young woman was not merely following the sheet music, she was interpreting it, breathing life into every measure. It was clear she had spent countless hours studying, practicing, and feeling the music deeply. Some students were quietly trying to imitate the melodies in their heads, but they quickly realized it was impossible to replicate. Even the simplest passage sounded extraordinary when played by her. They could see the talent she had cultivated in secret, a talent that had remained hidden until this moment. The young woman's performance was a revelation, challenging their assumptions about what was possible from someone who had always been quiet and reserved. As the piece grew more intense, the young woman moved into a section that required incredible coordination between her hands. Fast arpeggios and complex chords intertwined, demanding precision and fluidity. Her fingers danced across the keys, never hesitating, never faltering. The students watched, some with wide eyes, some with mouths slightly open, unable to comprehend how one person could handle such complexity with ease. The teacher was equally stunned. He realized that he had underestimated her entirely, and he felt a mix of admiration and humility. The emotional depth of the music became even more apparent as she continued. There were moments of melancholy, moments of joy, and moments of tension that seemed to mirror life itself. The young woman conveyed every emotion with clarity, drawing the listeners into the story she was telling through sound. Even students who had previously been skeptical or distracted were now fully engaged, caught up in the beauty and power of the performance. Her concentration was unwavering. Occasionally, her eyes would glance at the sheet music, but mostly she played from memory, letting her instincts guide her. It was clear that this talent was not just learned, it was part of her. The piano was an extension of her expression, and the music was a reflection of her thoughts and feelings. The room felt alive with the sound, as if the walls themselves were resonating with the energy she was creating. As she approached the climax of this section, the music became more dramatic. The notes grew louder, the rhythms more complex, and the tension in the room intensified. The students could feel the energy building, a wave of emotion that swept through them. Some were leaning forward, some were sitting back with eyes closed, fully immersed. The teacher, standing to the side, could only watch in awe. He realized that this performance was not just a display of skill, it was a gift, a rare and extraordinary talent that deserved recognition. The young woman's fingers moved with incredible speed and precision, yet there was a natural grace to every movement. Each hand seemed to operate independently, yet perfectly in harmony with the other. The students whispered among themselves, trying to express the impossible. "How can anyone play like this?" One asked quietly. "It's like she's born for this," another replied. The room was filled with a sense of wonder, a recognition that they were witnessing something truly remarkable. As she reached the final measures of this section, she slowed slightly, allowing the last notes to resonate fully. The room was silent again, the kind of silence that comes when everyone is holding their breath, savoring the last moments of something extraordinary. Then, slowly, applause began. It started quietly, but soon it grew louder, filling the room with genuine admiration. The students clapped, some standing, some cheering softly, unable to contain their excitement. The teacher, still amazed, joined in, his face full of respect and awe. The young woman lifted her hands from the keys and took a deep breath. Her expression was calm, almost serene, but there was a quiet pride in her eyes. She had faced a challenge that many would have found impossible and had risen above it. With grace and skill, the students continued to talk excitedly, sharing their amazement and trying to process what they had just witnessed. Even those who had once ignored her were now full of curiosity and admiration. The teacher approached her quietly, still stunned. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "That was beyond anything I expected. You have an incredible gift." She nodded politely, her eyes calm, her demeanor humble. She did not seek praise. She simply accepted the acknowledgement with quiet dignity. The classroom had changed in that moment. Everyone's perception of her had shifted, and the young woman had shown them a side of herself that they could never overlook again. As the day went on, the story of her performance spread quickly. Students who had previously dismissed her now sought her out, wanting to understand how she played with such skill and emotion. They asked questions, not about her personally, but about the music and her approach. The teacher, reflecting on the experience, realized that he had learned an important lesson about assumptions and hidden talent. He understood that some abilities remain unseen until the right moment. Waiting for someone to notice, the young woman returned to her usual quiet routine. But the impact of her performance lingered. Students would glance at her with newfound respect, and even the teacher found himself thinking about the music long after the class had ended. She had turned a challenge into an opportunity, revealing a talent that had been underestimated and unnoticed for far too long. The music had spoken for her, and everyone who heard it could not forget the experience. In that moment, she had not only played a difficult piece, but had changed the way the people around her saw her. The quiet student at the back of the room had proven that true talent does not always announce itself, and that sometimes the most extraordinary gifts are hidden in plain sight. The room had witnessed something remarkable, and the young woman had taken the first steps in showing the world her full potential. The young woman paused for a brief moment, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, feeling the vibrations of the notes she had just played. There was a sense of calm in her movements, but the energy in the room was electric. Students who had been spectators now realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Their whispers had turned into silent awe as they watched her prepare for the next section. The teachers, who had thought they were setting a simple challenge, were beginning to understand that this was more than a typical performance. This was a revelation. With a deep breath, she started the next segment, a section that was even more intricate and demanding. The notes seemed to flow effortlessly from her fingers, weaving together complex chords and melodies that required absolute precision. The students leaned forward, their eyes wide, as if trying to capture every movement. Every time her hands shifted position, the music transformed seamlessly. The sound was clear, powerful, and yet delicate in its emotion. Even those who had struggled with music before felt drawn in by the way she played. Her focus was unwavering. She was completely immersed in the music, each note a reflection of years of practice and hidden talent. The classroom was no longer just a room. It felt like a small concert hall, alive with the sound she created. The students felt the intensity and the depth of her performance, their hearts racing with the crescendos, their emotions touched by the softer passages. The teacher could hardly believe what he was seeing. He had watched countless students play, yet none had ever held the room's attention so completely. The complexity of the next part tested not only her technical skill, but also her ability to convey emotion through the music. Rapid sequences of notes moved between her hands with flawless timing. She emphasized certain passages, allowing them to resonate fully before continuing to the next. Her interpretation was unique. She wasn't just playing what was written on the page. She was telling a story, and each student could feel a part of that story within themselves. Some felt joy, others sadness, and some even a mixture of both, swept up by the emotional flow. Every note was intentional, every pause meaningful. The young woman's performance revealed a depth that left the audience in awe. Students whispered softly to one another, trying to describe the experience. "It's like she's speaking without words," one said. "I've never felt music like this before," another whispered back. The teacher, who had initially believed this would be a simple exercise, could only nod in silent admiration. He realized that her skill was not just technical, but also deeply expressive, a rare combination that set her apart from anyone he had taught before. The young woman continued, moving into passages that required immense dexterity and focus. Her hands glided over the keys with ease, each movement precise and deliberate. The students were captivated, some holding their breath, as if fearing that a single wrong note might break the spell. The teacher watched, astonished by her ability to maintain control and expressiveness simultaneously. Every measure she played seemed to unfold naturally, yet the audience knew the immense effort and talent required to achieve such perfection. As the music built, the room was filled with a sense of anticipation. The young woman's performance was more than skill. It was artistry. She shaped the music with subtle changes in tempo, volume, and touch, creating layers of emotion that were almost tangible. The students felt each shift, each rise and fall, and were drawn deeper into the experience. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others followed every note with intense focus. The teacher, unable to look away, realized he had underestimated not just her talent, but her capacity to move people with music. The piece reached a challenging section that required rapid movement and coordination between both hands. Most students would have hesitated or stumbled, but she played with fluidity, precision, and grace. The classroom was silent except for the music, the sound echoing with a richness that made it impossible to focus on anything else. Her fingers danced across the keys, creating melodies that seemed to float above the room, capturing the imagination of every listener. The complexity of the piece, combined with her skill, left the audience in a state of stunned admiration. Her performance was a perfect balance of power and subtlety. She transitioned from loud, dramatic chords to soft, delicate passages without effort, making the music feel alive. Every note was placed with intention, and every chord carried emotion. The students were mesmerized, realizing that they were witnessing something rare and special. The teacher, who had challenged her without expecting much, felt a deep respect for the young woman. He knew this moment would remain with him forever. As she neared the final measures of the section, the music became even more expressive. The young woman poured all her focus and emotion into the notes, creating a crescendo that left the room vibrating with energy. Students sat on the edge of their seats, some unable to believe their ears. The teacher, completely captivated, watched in awe as she navigated the complex passages effortlessly. Her performance was no longer just impressive. It was unforgettable. Finally, she reached the end, letting the last note linger and resonate through the room. The silence that followed was profound. The students stared in disbelief, absorbing the impact of what they had just witnessed. The teacher's mouth was slightly open, unable to find words. Slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder as everyone recognized the magnitude of her talent. The students clapped enthusiastically, some standing, some cheering quietly, all united in their admiration. The teacher joined in, giving a nod of deep respect. The young woman lowered her hands and took a quiet breath. Her face was calm, but there was a subtle glow of satisfaction in her expression. She had turned an unexpected challenge into an extraordinary demonstration of skill and artistry. The students, who had once overlooked her, now saw her in a new light. They approached her after class with questions and admiration, eager to learn more about the music she played and the talent she possessed. The teacher, reflecting on the experience, realized that he had been wrong to underestimate her, and understood the importance of recognizing hidden potential. The young woman returned to her usual quiet demeanor, but the room was forever changed. Her performance had shown that talent could be quiet and unassuming yet incredibly powerful. She had transformed a simple classroom into a space of wonder and inspiration. Students would remember this day for years, inspired by her dedication, skill, and ability to convey deep emotion through music. The teacher, humbled by her gift, knew that he had witnessed a rare and extraordinary talent, one that deserved to be nurtured and celebrated. Her quiet confidence and exceptional skill had left an indelible mark on everyone present. The young woman had not only mastered a difficult piece, but had also revealed the depth of her genius to the world. From that day forward, the perception of her abilities shifted completely. The students and teachers alike understood that true talent often hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And in that moment, the young woman had captured the hearts and minds of everyone in the room, leaving them inspired and awed by the extraordinary music she had created. The young woman sat back after her final note had faded, the echoes still lingering in the room like a gentle reminder of what had just happened. The students were quiet for a moment, absorbing the experience, and then slowly, a wave of applause began. It started with a few hesitant claps, then spread like wildfire. Soon, the room was filled with the sound of admiration and awe. Everyone could feel that they had witnessed something truly extraordinary, a moment that would stay with them long after they left the classroom. The teacher, still standing near the piano, could hardly believe what he had seen. He had thought he was simply challenging a quiet student with a difficult piece, expecting perhaps a stumble or a modest attempt. Instead, he had watched a performance that was flawless, deeply emotional, and breathtaking in its mastery. He approached her slowly, his eyes filled with respect and a new understanding. "I have never seen anything like that," he said softly. "You have an incredible gift. You must continue to share it with the world." The young woman nodded quietly, her expression calm but her eyes revealing a quiet pride. She had never played to impress others. Her music had always been a personal journey. But now, seeing the impact it had on those around her, she realized that sharing her talent could bring joy and inspiration to many. The students began to gather around her, asking questions, complimenting her, and expressing their amazement. Some wanted to know how she had learned to play so beautifully. Others simply wanted to tell her how much they had been moved. She responded with polite smiles and gentle words, humbled despite the extraordinary performance she had just delivered. Word of her talent spread quickly throughout the school. Students who had once overlooked her now sought her out, eager to hear more and learn from her. Teachers who had doubted her abilities found themselves reflecting on the assumptions they had made. They realized that talent often hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to shine. The young woman's performance had changed not only how people saw her, but also how they viewed potential and ability. She had shown them that quiet determination, dedication, and passion could produce results far beyond what anyone could anticipate. In the days that followed, the young woman continued to play, both for herself and for those who wanted to listen. Her confidence grew, not because she sought attention, but because she recognized the value of sharing her gift. She began to explore more complex pieces, pushing herself further, always striving to express emotion through her music. The students who had watched her perform were inspired to pursue their own talents, realizing that hard work and dedication could lead to unexpected excellence. The teacher encouraged her, offering guidance when needed, but always respecting her independence and unique approach. The young woman's story became an example for others in the school. It was not just about playing the piano. It was about believing in oneself, embracing one's abilities, and not allowing others' expectations or underestimations to define what one could achieve. She demonstrated that talent could flourish quietly, unnoticed by many, yet still make a profound impact when finally revealed. Her journey encouraged others to look beyond appearances and assumptions, to recognize potential where it might be hidden. As she continued to perform, she discovered a deeper connection with her music. Each piece she played became a conversation, a way to communicate thoughts and feelings that words could not capture. Students and teachers alike found themselves moved by the subtlety, power, and emotion in her performances. Her music was not just entertainment, it was a lesson in patience, dedication, and the beauty of expression. People began to realize that true talent was not just measured by technique, but by the ability to touch others' hearts. Over time, she gained recognition outside the classroom as well. Others in the community who heard about her talent came to listen, amazed by the depth and beauty of her playing. She remained humble, always focusing on the music itself rather than the attention it brought. Her dedication to her craft was evident in every note, and those who heard her play could feel the sincerity and care in her performance. The young woman's journey had begun quietly, in a back corner of a classroom, and had grown into something that inspired many, showing that extraordinary talent often emerges when least expected. The young woman's experience also changed the way the teachers approached their students. They began to look more closely, listen more carefully, and encourage rather than assume. They understood that every student had unique strengths, some of which might not be immediately visible. By providing opportunities and challenges, they could help these talents surface. Her performance was a reminder that assumptions could limit understanding and that the true potential of individuals often lay hidden until given the right chance to emerge. In the quiet moments after her performances, the young woman would often reflect on the journey that brought her to this point. She remembered the hours spent practicing alone, the moments of doubt, and the quiet determination that kept her moving forward. Each challenge she faced had prepared her for this moment, allowing her to express herself fully and touch the lives of those around her. She had learned that perseverance, focus, and passion were just as important as natural ability. Her story became one of hope, inspiration, and the power of unseen effort. The impact of her talent extended beyond the school. People began to share her story, inspiring others to believe in themselves and pursue their own passions. No matter how quietly or unobtrusively they began, she had demonstrated that extraordinary achievements do not always come with fanfare or recognition. Sometimes they emerge in subtle, unexpected ways, leaving a lasting impression on those fortunate enough to witness them. Her journey reminded everyone that every individual has the potential to surprise and inspire the world in their own unique way. By the end of the school year, the young woman had become a symbol of hidden talent and perseverance. Students and teachers alike spoke of her with admiration, recognizing that her quiet confidence and dedication had created something remarkable. She had taken a challenge, one that others assumed would expose her limitations, and turned it into a showcase of extraordinary skill and artistry. Her performances had not only revealed her genius, but had also encouraged others to look deeper, work harder, and believe in themselves. The young woman continued to play, each performance building on the last, bringing joy, inspiration, and a sense of wonder to all who listened. She remained humble, focused on the music and the emotions it could convey, rather than seeking recognition. Her story became a testament to the power of talent, dedication, and courage. It showed that even the quietest voices, the most unnoticed individuals, could make a profound impact when given the opportunity to shine. In the years to come, the young woman's influence spread beyond the school. Her story inspired countless others to pursue their passions, to believe in their abilities, and to recognize that true talent often waits for the right moment to emerge. The students who had witnessed her performances carried the memory with them, motivated to embrace their own potential. The teachers learned a valuable lesson about patience, observation, and the importance of nurturing every student's unique gifts. Through her music, the young woman changed lives, one note at a time. She had transformed a classroom into a space of inspiration, a challenge into an opportunity, and quiet determination into extraordinary achievement. Her journey proved that talent, dedication, and courage could overcome assumptions and reveal a brilliance that touched the hearts of everyone around her. And in that way, the quiet student who had once been overlooked had become a beacon of hope, showing the world that true genius often lies just beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered.